Happy Monday. Hopefully, everyone's having a blessed day. I certainly am. I had the day off because the company I work for decides to observe Juneteenth. Now, I made a video on Friday about Juneteenth, a very stripped down history of Juneteenth. But I'm also on this 3-day weekend as I'm slowly building my shed for my property. It got me thinking of the times we're in. Now, I don't think it's going to be doom and gloom like everyone thinks it is, but I also don't think it's going to be like the recession of 2008, but I don't think it's going to be the depression in the 1920s. I think there's going to be somewhere in the middle. Now, there's people that have charts talking about the financial situation with the stock market. We also have turmoil in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. That has a very likely possibility it's going to be sparking into a more international war. And I don't know how that's going to end, to be honest. But there's things that to keep in mind, things to think about. America, since I'm going to be mostly living in America, I'm going to have a very American centric mindset when I look into these events. Yes, I do know that gas is getting really expensive. Food is getting really expensive. And there's going to be a breaking point to where it won't be able to raise anymore. And there's going to be something that's going to happen. It's going to be terrible. It's going to happen. Now, when I say terrible, I don't think it's going to be all out collapse as a society. It's definitely going to change things, and it's probably going to change things for the better. Now, there are many people ahead of the game when it comes to these things, but these are things you need to think about. First one is turn your brown thumb into a green thumb. Learn how to garden, whether it's keeping one plant, two plants, or even a herb garden. Even if you're in an apartment complex or you're very limited in space, you could definitely utilize a lot of the spaces, whether or not you have a balcony or not. As you can see right here, this is the Amazon, I don't really care. Something as simple as this right here. This is what, $90 that you could grow some tomatoes, some green leaves, and some herbs. It looks like it's basil in the back. Now, these are things to think about now. You could probably make something like this for really cheap, around $60, or you could get something delivered to your house using Amazon. But these are just things to keep in mind. And of course, other thing you could do is start buying canned foods, buying ramen food, buying rice, buying beans that have a really long shelf life. That you can just start buying a little extra. Let's say if you go through 3 cans of beans a month, start buying 4 or 5. You still go through the 3, but you're slowly building up a reserve in case hard times. Now, I watched this one video where he said something interesting. Now, he's more of a prepper. And I don't remember exactly which video it was. But he says, long-term prepping is really good. But what about the short-term prepping? Do you have enough resources to go like a week without power? Because I went almost a week without power. I'm going to do a little asterisk because I was able to leave my house and go over to my mom's and her husband's house, which did have power, which was really great during the winter storm that hit Texas. So these are just things to think of. I mean, also another thing to think of is, are you able to cook the food? Do you have a way to start a fire at your home or area that you're at to be able to cook the meals? Because without electricity and the way things are going, most of the stoves are going to be electric. Unfortunately, you're going to be needing to be able to find a way to cook that. Now, I do know that there's resources out there if you're in a home, whether it be solar, wind, hydro, if you're next to a creek. Another thing to think about is buying a battery pack, whether it's the Powerwall from Tesla or making something else or of another type of battery technology. That way, you have enough power reserves to do the bare minimum, whether it's to cook or keep your refrigerator or freezer going or your heater. Just something to think about, you know. I mean, I don't think it's going to be that level, but also think about short term prepping as well. Now, of course, now let's say you got your garden, you got like 30 of these, or you got about 10 acres and you got a nice little farm going, but you start running into surplus. What do you do with the surplus? Well, you might want to learn how to can. Now, when I was growing up, I think I had two families. One that was more urban, which was my on my mother's side, and more that was more rural or more farm based, which was my father's side. And they would used to have canned or jarring vegetables that they would start prepping. Not really prepping, but they lived during the Great Depression, so they always had food on hand. They were always had canned food or jarring available in case times got a little stiff and then they needed. They had that mindset. And that's something that was never taught to me. Not that I don't think it was a need to teach to me because the way things were progressing. But I'm also was watching a series of this another video where this lady is talking about the hard times about to come. I think people realize that America is not in its best stage right now, and I do know that we're going to get out of it. The question is when. Even if the Republicans were to take the House and the Senate, you still have Biden in charge. And some people want a push for Biden to be removed, but then you have Harris. And I don't know if she's going to be any better or any worse than Biden. But I do think when 2024 comes around, we're not going to have a Biden Harris in the White House. It may not be a Republican, but it will not be them. It may be another Democrat, but very likely it is going to be a Republican. It may be Trump, it may be Santos, it may be someone else, it may be Pompeo. I don't know. And that's when things are going to start getting a little bit better. That's when the war on fossil fuels is going to take a pause because the war on fossil fuels is really driving the inflation. Now, when I say it's going to be a pause, a Republican's not going to be able to keep the House and the Senate as a Republican is in the White House. And another Democrat will become president. And who knows at that time if we're going to be more still reliant on the fuel. Maybe we have progressed because a lot of people are starting to get green energies installed in their home and they're doing more homestead. They took the Biden years as a warning shot and decided to do a little prepping themselves to making sure that they're taken care of. Hopefully, I mean, I started this process a couple of years ago by buying some land. Started off, I needed a place to shoot that would not be close to me. But now I'm thinking about more and more, thinking about I might actually build a house there and live out there and kind of retire and start a farm, get back to nature. But of course, when you're farming and when you're doing a garden, something else you need to keep in mind is compost. Because as you are farming, you're taking nutrition out of the ground to produce your delicious fruits, your delicious vegetables. You need to replenish them, and one good way to replenish them is through composting, whether it be paper, logs, uh, bones, fish bones. If you have livestock, it's a good way to put the proteins that you don't consume into a compost pile. Your vegetables, of course. And if you have a fire going, you can put the ashes in there just to where it kind of gives you this rich soil. And if you really wanted to, you could put your waste in there. You could go with a non-traditional flushing toilet and have a compost toilet to where you take care of your business and you use buckets to take care of your business. Um, I'm not really sold on one way or the other way, whether to separate the solid with the liquids. For guys, it's a little bit easier because all you gotta do is walk outside and drop trowel and sprinkle the yard or a tree. Females, it's not as easy, and I understand the body parts are different, so that may not be an option for some people. But you could definitely just throw a lot of organics together, maybe some proteins in there, and give yourself a nice and rich compost. Um, there's also compost tea where you just throw a bunch of water and a bunch of stuff, and you just let it ferment for a while, and you just spray that on your plants or water the ground in the plants. I mean, just things to think about when times are coming. Because I don't know how bad it's going to get, but I do know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. Nothing lasts forever. This involves the good and the bad. We had a really good run of good times for the last, I would say, 30, 40 years since Reagan took office. And now we have a idiot running the office doing war on the oil industry, which is driving up inflation. And his idea to fix inflation is to print more money, which is going to cause more of an inflation because inflation is a lot of different things that add up to it. One is inflation is you have a pumpkin pie or a pecan pie, and you have 20 people there, so you make 20 pieces. Now those pieces are going to be very skinny, which means that you're going to get less value out of a piece opposed to maybe cutting into 8 pieces. That's one level of inflation. The other inflation is more of a cost inflation, which is the fuel prices being so expensive or oil prices being so expensive. When you go to the pump and it's $5 or $6, or in some cases it's up to $7 to $10, and depending on your location, that's an added cost. So if by yourself it's an added cost. Now think about truckers. I think diesel was at $6 or $7. That's an additional cost of transportation. Not to mention that you have farm equipment that runs off of either diesel or fuel. That's going to be passed on to the consumer, which is also causing another inflation. So, terrible things are already happening. Terrible things are going to happen. And if the war between Ukraine and Russia turn international, expect a lot more terrible things to happen. But just like everything, it comes and it goes, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. Just gotta stick it out. With that being said, leave a comment down below on what your thoughts are. Smash the like and subscribe button on any and all platforms or just the platform you're currently watching. But most importantly, start thinking about the future. Because sooner or later, the future will be today.